Number 10. The Oldowan stone chopper. Long before cities, long before fire-lit myths, long before a human hand ever shaped metal, one of our ancestors picked up a stone and changed the rules of survival. The Oldowan chopper was not beautiful. It was not symmetrical like later hand axes, not balanced like a spear, not silent like a bow. It was a rounded cobble struck against another stone until a sharp edge appeared. That edge was the beginning of something enormous. For the first time, a weak animal with no claws, no fangs and no armored body could carry an artificial tooth in its hand. Around 2.6 million years ago, early hominins in Africa began making these crude stone tools. But to modernize, they can look almost too simple to matter, a broken rock with flakes removed from one side. But simplicity is exactly what made them revolutionary. A chopper could slice hide, cut meat, scrape tissue from bone, break open carcasses, and reach marrow locked inside long bones. It allowed our ancestors to take food that their bodies alone could never access. A lion could kill, a hyena could crush. But a hominin with a stone edge could arrive after the predators, open what remained, and turn leftovers into energy. That energy mattered. Meat and marrow bore dense sources of calories and fat, and in the brutal landscapes of early Africa, calories were not just food, and they were survival, reproduction, brain growth, and movement into new environments. The chopper did not instantly make our ancestors rulers of the savannah, but it gave them a new position inside it. They were no longer only small animals waiting to be hunted. They became scavengers with tools, then competitors, then hunters. The shift was slow, but once it began, it never stopped. A stone edge changed the relationship between body and world. The darker part is that the chopper was not only a food tool. Anything sharp enough to cut hide is sharp enough to cut flesh. Anything heavy enough to crack bone is heavy enough to break a skull. Now, the same object that opened animal carcasses could be used against predators, rivals, or members of another group. We cannot know the first time a chopper was used as a weapon against another living creature, but the possibility is built into its form. The moment a tool becomes an extension of the hand becomes more dangerous than evolution alone designed it to be. What makes the Oldowan chopper so important is what it demanded from the mind that made it. The maker had to choose the right stone, strike it at an angle, understand that one blow could change the shape of an object, and remember the result well enough to repeat it. And that may sound simple, but it marks a major cognitive step. The stone was not merely found useful, it was made useful. The edge existed first as a possibility, then as an action, then as a tool. In that tiny sequence lives the beginning of technology. The chopper also changed the future of the body. Hands that could grip, strike, cut, and carry tools became more valuable. Eyes that could judge angles and distance mattered more. Groups that could share knowledge, watch one another work, and pass techniques forward gained an advantage. Over vast stretches of time, tool-making became part of the pressure shaping the human line. The brain did not grow in isolation, and it grew in a world where stone, meat, danger, and memory were locked together. Every improved edge made survival slightly more likely. Every child who watched an elder strike stone inherited more than food. They inherited method. There is something terrifying about how small the beginning was. No monument marks the first chopper. No cave painting records the moment. No story survived from the hands that made it. Only stones remain, scattered across ancient landscapes, carrying scars where another stone struck them millions of years ago. Yet from those scars came the entire chain of human weapons. Hand axes, spears, spear throwers, bows, slings, blades, and every later invention designed to make the body deadlier than it was born to be. The Oldowan chopper belongs at the start of this list because it was not simply a weapon. It was the first crack in the old order. Before it, our ancestors survived inside the limits of tooth, nail, speed, and luck. After it, they began surviving through invention. The savannah had produced stronger animals before. It had produced faster animals, larger animals, animals with jaws powerful enough to crush bone. But with the chopper, it produced something different. A creature that could alter the world outside its body and carry that alteration into a fight. The first weapon was just a stone with an edge, but once that edge entered the hand, nothing on earth would face humans the same way again. Number 9. The Acheulean hand axe. If the Oldowan chopper was the first crack in the old order, the Acheulean hand axe was the moment that crack became a tradition. It appeared in Africa roughly 1.7 million years ago and then spread across huge parts of the ancient world. Kingdoms rise and fall in centuries, languages change in a few thousand years. But this tool remained useful for more than 1 million years, making it one of the longest-lasting weapons ever created by the human family. At first glance, the hand axe looks simple, a stone shaped into a teardrop or oval form, sharpened on both sides, with a cutting edge around much of its body and a base that could fit in the hand. But compared to the earlier chopper, it reveals a different kind of mind. The chopper was rough and immediate. The hand axe required symmetry, planning, patience, and control. Its maker had to imagine the final shape before it existed. Every strike removed stone forever. One wrong blow could ruin the tool. To make a good hand axe, an ancient craftsperson had to think several steps ahead. That matters because the Acheulean hand axe was not only a blade, it was a mental template made visible in stone. Across enormous distances and vast periods of time, different groups produced tools with the same basic form. And that means knowledge was being repeated, taught, watched, corrected, and carried forward. Long before writing or schools, stone itself became the classroom. A child could watch an elder strike the core, learn the angle, remember the rhythm, and inherit a technology older than memory. The tool was brutally useful. It could butcher large animals, slice meat, split hide, scrape bone, cut wood, dig, chop, and defend. In the hand of an ancient human, it was knife, axe, cleaver, and weapon at once. A sharp Acheulean edge could open the body of an animal many times larger than the person holding it. It could process a carcass quickly before predators returned, and if necessary, it could be driven into the skull or face of a rival. That is the unsettling truth of multi-purpose tools. The same design that feeds a group can also destroy one. The world around the hand axe was not gentle. These tools moved through landscapes filled with giant animals, elephants, rhinos, wild cattle, horses, hippos, and predators strong enough to kill a human ancestor in seconds. A carcass meant food, but also danger. Lions, hyenas, and other scavengers knew the same smell. A group with hand axes could cut faster, take more, fight harder, and leave with calories that changed the future of their bodies and brains. But this hand axe helped turn ancient humans from nervous scavengers into competitors on a violent landscape. What makes the hand axe even stranger is that many examples are more symmetrical and carefully shaped than pure function seems to require. Some are so balanced and refined that archaeologists have wondered whether they carried social meaning as well as practical value. A well-made hand axe may have shown skill, patience, intelligence, or status. It may have been a display of competence as much as a cutting tool. If so, this weapon did not only shape survival, it may have shaped how ancient humans judged one another. There is a quiet horror in its success. For more than 1 million years, the same basic shape followed ancient humans across continents. Animal after animal was opened by its edge. Bones were cracked, hides were stripped, wood was split, camps were fed. Rivals may have died beneath the same stone form. No sword, spear, or firearm has ruled human life for so long. The Acheulean hand axe outlasted climates, migrations, and entire branches of the human family. Its deepest legacy may be inside us, making it trained the hand and the eye together. It required rhythm, focus, judgment, and memory. It rewarded minds capable of planning and bodies capable of precision. And over vast time, this kind of tool-making helped build the relationship between brain and hand that later made art, language, architecture, and war possible. The hand axe was not just something ancient humans made, it was one of the things that helped make ancient humans more human. That is why the Acheulean hand axe belongs near the beginning of this story. It was not the first sharp stone, but it was the first great weapon tradition, repeated, refined, carried, and trusted for longer than our species has existed. In its edge was hunger, in its shape was intelligence, in its use was violence, and in its endurance was a warning that once the human family learned to improve a weapon, it never stopped improving itself around it. Number 8. The Schöningen wooden spears. In 1994, archaeologists working in an open-cast mine near Schöningen in northern Germany uncovered something that should not have survived. Buried in ancient waterlogged sediment were wooden spears, preserved in conditions so rare that they reached the modern world almost intact. Wood usually disappears from prehistory. It rots, breaks, burns, or returns to the soil long before archaeology can find it. But these weapons remained sealed away for hundreds of thousands of years, waiting beneath mud that kept oxygen out and time at a distance. These spears were roughly 300,000 to 400,000 years old, depending on the dating framework used, and that age is what made them revolutionary. Before their discovery, many researchers still imagined early humans in Europe as scavengers more than hunters, creatures that waited for predators to finish and then took what remained. Schöningen damaged that picture. These were not random sticks with sharpened ends. They were carefully made weapons, shaped from selected wood, balanced along their length, and refined with enough skill to suggest a mature tradition of hunting technology. What makes the Schöningen spears so unsettling is their design. Some were made from spruce, with the harder part of the tree used for the point. Their weight and balance suggest that they could be thrown with force and accuracy, more like javelins than crude clubs. A weapon like that requires more than strength. It requires understanding how wood behaves, how a shaft flies, how a point enters flesh, and how distance changes the rules of danger. The maker had to imagine the throw before the spear ever left the hand. The site also contained horse remains, and that context changes everything. A horse is not easy prey. It is fast, powerful, alert, and dangerous in panic. Killing one requires planning. Killing many requires coordination. But the keep of the bones at Schöningen suggests that ancient hunters were not simply finding dead animals on the shore of an old lake. They were likely organizing themselves around prey behavior, terrain, and timing. They may have driven horses toward water or trapped them in vulnerable positions before striking. This was not chance. It was strategy. That strategy reveals a mind far more capable than the old stereotypes allowed. To hunt with spears in a group, individuals need shared attention, roles, signals, and trust. Someone must know when to move. Someone must know when to wait. Someone must understand where the animal is likely to run. Whether their communication looked like language as we know it or something older and rougher, the hunt required cooperation. Schöningen suggests that hundreds of thousands of years before cities, armies, or written commands, ancient humans were already acting together with deadly purpose. The weapons themselves carry a specific kind of fear. A stone tool cuts after contact. A hand axe demands closeness. But a thrown spear changes the space between hunter and prey. It lets the human body project danger outward. For the first time, death could leave the hand and cross open air. That distance mattered. It reduced the risk of being kicked, bitten, crushed, or gored. It allowed a group to strike from multiple angles. It made the human arm longer than biology had made it. The spear was not only a weapon, it was an artificial extension of reach, timing, and intent. There is another disturbing implication. A spear powerful enough to kill a horse could also kill another human. No invention separates hunting from violence for long. The same balance, point, and throwing force that brought down animals could be turned against rivals, strangers, or members of another group. Schöningen does not prove a battlefield, but it proves capability. Once a weapon can kill at distance, conflict changes. The body of the attacker no longer has to meet the body of the victim directly. A sharpened shaft can carry the decision across the gap. The deepest lesson of the Schöningen spears is that ancient humans were not waiting for intelligence to arrive. They already possessed planning, craft, teaching, cooperation, and tactical awareness. The spears were not experimental accidents. They were too well made for that. They belonged to people who understood the materials around them and turned wood into a technology of survival and death. If the mud had not preserved them, we might still underestimate that world. That is why the Schöningen wooden spears belong on this list. They are not as dramatic as a sword, not as elegant as a bow, and not as famous as later weapons of empire. But they reveal the moment when humans learned to kill with planning at distance. In those sharpened wooden shafts, we can see a turning point. Our ancestors were no longer only reacting to danger. They were organizing it, shaping it, and throwing it back into the world. Number 7. The Neanderthal thrusting spear. If the Schöningen spears showed that ancient humans could kill from a distance, the Neanderthal thrusting spear shows something darker, a world where survival often meant closing the distance on purpose. Neanderthals lived in Ice Age Europe among animals that could destroy a human body in seconds. Cave bears, aurochs, bison, wild horses, woolly rhinoceroses, and mammoths shared the same cold landscapes. These were not small animals fleeing helplessly from hunters. They were massive, dangerous, and capable of turning one failed hunt into a broken skeleton. The Neanderthal spear was usually a heavy wooden shaft designed for close contact, often fitted with a carefully shaped stone point. To use it, a hunter had to approach within striking range and drive the point into the animal's body with force. That meant getting close enough to feel the animal's movement and close enough to die if the strike failed. A modern person can call such a weapon primitive, but there is nothing simple about a tool that demands timing, strength, courage, and complete commitment. The bones of Neanderthals show the cost of this life. Many adult skeletons carry signs of severe injury, fractures, damaged ribs, crushed joints, skull trauma, and wounds similar to those suffered by people who work around large, violent animals. These were not hunters killing from safety. They were bodies entering impact range. A failed strike could mean being kicked by a horse, gored by an aurochs, slammed by a bison, or crushed by a bear. The spear gave them power, but it did not remove danger. It forced them to meet danger face to face. That is what makes the Neanderthal thrusting spear terrifying. It reveals a hunting strategy built around physical confrontation. A woolly rhinoceros could weigh several tons, but a cave bear could tower over a human. A mammoth was almost beyond imagination as prey. Yet Neanderthals hunted large animals again and again for hundreds of thousands of years, with weapons that required them to stand close enough to be killed. They survived because they were strong, skilled, coordinated, and willing to risk their bodies in ways modern humans would find almost unthinkable. The weapon also reveals their intelligence. Hafting a stone point to a wooden shaft is not easy. The point must be shaped correctly, fitted securely, and bound with material that can survive impact. Some Neanderthal technologies used adhesives such as birch tar, one of the earliest known synthetic materials. Producing it required control of heat and oxygen conditions, meaning these people were not crude brutes with sticks. They understood materials. They selected stone, worked wood, prepared binding substances, and built weapons for one of the most dangerous forms of hunting on Earth. A thrusting spear also required group strategy. One hunter alone against a giant animal would have had little chance. Several hunters working together could surround, distract, drive, and strike. That required communication and trust. Someone had to hold position while another moved. Someone had to risk the first contact. Someone had to finish the animal once it was wounded. The spear was a weapon, but the real system was the group behind it. Neanderthal survival was not only muscle, it was cooperation under extreme danger. There is a brutal intimacy to this weapon that later projectile tools would reduce. A bow lets the killer stand hidden. A sling lets a stone cross distance before the victim understands. But a thrusting spear brings the hunter into the animal's final violence. The hand feels the shaft. The shaft feels the impact. The hunter and the prey are locked into the same moment. This kind of killing is not clean, distant, or impersonal. It is close enough for fear to exist on both sides. The Neanderthal thrusting spear belongs on this list because it shows a form of courage almost erased from modern imagination. These were not failed humans waiting to disappear. They were expert hunters who faced Ice Age giants with sharpened wood, stone points, and bodies hardened by danger. Their weapons did not make the world safe. They made survival possible in a world that was never safe to begin with. And when modern humans eventually replaced them, it may not have been because we were braver. It may have been because we found ways to kill from farther away. Number 6. The atlatl spear thrower. Somewhere in the deep past, a hunter realized that the human arm did not have to end at the wrist. A short piece of wood, bone, or antler, carved with a hook at one end, could become an extension of the body. With it, a spear could fly farther, faster, and harder than the hand alone could ever manage. This weapon is called the atlatl, or spear thrower, and it changed the ancient world by turning a hunter's arm into a lever. The idea is simple, but the effect is enormous. A dart or light spear rests against the hook of the atlatl. When the hunter throws, the tool extends the throwing motion and increases the speed of release. The result is a projectile with far more range and force than an ordinary hand-thrown spear. A person who once needed to stand dangerously close to prey could now strike from a safer distance. That one change altered the relationship between humans and the largest animals on Earth. Before weapons like the atlatl, hunting giant prey demanded terrifying courage. A hunter had to approach animals that could crush, gore, kick, or tear apart a human body. The atlatl did not remove all danger, but it changed the odds. It allowed hunters to attack from farther away, strike in groups, and wound an animal repeatedly without standing directly beneath its tusks, horns, or claws. The distance became protection. Speed became force. A carved stick with a hook became a way to make human weakness less important. What makes the atlatl so disturbing is how much killing power it gave to ordinary human bodies. A mammoth was larger, a bison was stronger, a ground sloth had claws that could shred flesh. But none of them understood that danger could now fly from beyond the reach of their bodies. A hunter with an atlatl could launch a dart into an animal before the animal could close the gap. A group of hunters could surround a herd and send projectiles from several angles. The weapon did not make humans physically stronger. It made intelligence travel through the air. But the atlatl also changed the skill of hunting. It required practice, rhythm, and timing. A poorly thrown dart was useless. A skilled thrower could strike with accuracy and deep penetration. Children who grew up with the weapon would have learned not only how to throw, but how to read distance, wind, movement, and fear. The tool turned hunting into a discipline of body and mind. It rewarded training, it rewarded coordination, it rewarded patience. In that sense, the atlatl was not just a weapon, it was a school for violence. Its spread belongs to the larger story of humans becoming long-range predators. Earlier hunters had to meet danger more directly. The atlatl widened the killing zone. It allowed humans to take animals that once had natural protection through size alone. That protection began to fail. Across many Ice Age landscapes, large mammals faced hunters who could plan, cooperate, and strike from distance. Climate change also pressured these animals. But weapons like the atlatl made human predation more efficient at the worst possible time. The giants were not facing one threat. They were facing a changing world and a new kind of hunter. There is a darker implication hidden inside the weapon. Anything that can kill a large animal from distance can also kill a human from distance. The atlatl did not only transform hunting, it transformed conflict, and a rival group no longer had to be reached by hand axe or thrusting spear. A dart could cross the space first. Violence became less intimate than the Neanderthal spear, but still personal enough for the thrower to watch the result. It was a step toward the future of warfare: farther range, lower risk, greater killing power. The atlatl's simplicity makes it even more unsettling. It was not a machine of metal. It did not require cities, mines, furnaces, or armies. It could be carved from organic material and carried by a single person. Yet in the right hands, it multiplied the force of the human body. That is the pattern repeated throughout weapon history. Others' most dangerous inventions are not always the largest. Sometimes they are the ones that quietly change the math of survival. That is why the atlatl belongs on this list. It represents the moment when humans learned to make distance itself into a weapon. The hand no longer had to touch what it killed. The body no longer had to stand within reach of every animal it hunted. A short lever turned muscle into speed and speed into death. From that point on, the strongest creature in the landscape was not always the one with the largest body. It was the one that could throw its violence farther than anything else could answer. Number 5, the first bow and arrow. Somewhere in the deep past, long before armies marched under banners or kings claimed victory over conquered land, a human being learned how to store violence in a bent piece of wood. The bow looked simple: a flexible stave, a string, and a straight shaft tipped with stone, bone, or hardened wood. But the idea behind it was revolutionary. Unlike a spear, which depends on the strength of a single throw, the bow stores energy before release. A hunter pulls the string, bends the wood, waits in silence, and then lets the weapon do what the arm alone could never do. That single change altered the rules of hunting and conflict. And a thrusting spear required contact. A thrown spear required open movement. Even an atlatl still demanded a visible throwing motion. But a bow allowed a person to kill from concealment. The archer could crouch behind brush, wait in shadow, and release an arrow before the target understood where danger was coming from. The victim might hear nothing until impact. In that moment, human violence became quieter, safer, and more controlled. The earliest evidence for bow and arrow technology is difficult to preserve because bows, strings, and arrow shafts were made from materials that rot quickly. The wood, sinew, plant fiber, and bone rarely survive tens of thousands of years unless conditions are exceptional. What often remains are small stone points with impact damage, shaped too lightly for hand-thrown spears, and marked by the kind of fractures produced by high-speed projectiles. These tiny fragments are enough to suggest a massive shift. The bow may have been present far earlier than the surviving wooden examples can prove. What makes the bow terrifying is the distance it creates between action and consequence. With older close-range weapons, the hunter had to share danger with the prey. A Neanderthal facing a bison or bear with a thrusting spear had to stand within reach of the animal's final violence. The bow changed that relationship. The archer did not need to feel the animal's breath or stand beneath its horns. The arrow carried the risk forward while the body stayed behind. The strongest animal in the landscape could be wounded by someone it never reached. That distance also changed human conflict. A hand axe kills face to face. A club demands closeness. A spear still shows the attacker. But an arrow can arrive from trees, grass, rocks, or darkness. It can strike before warning, before challenge, before eye contact. In hunting, this made humans more effective. In warfare, it made humans more dangerous to each other. The bow turned patience into a weapon and silence into a battlefield advantage. The weapon required skill, but not brute strength alone. A good archer needed steady hands, trained eyes, controlled breathing, and the ability to read distance, wind, movement, and timing. The bow rewarded practice from childhood. It created specialists, people whose bodies changed around the draw, whose shoulders, fingers, and instincts were shaped by repetition. A single arrow was only a small object, but behind it stood years of training and generations of knowledge. The bow also multiplied the power of a group. One archer could wound an animal. Several archers could surround it with invisible danger. A herd, a rival group, or a charging predator could be struck from multiple directions before reaching the attackers. This made the bow not just a hunting tool, but a system of control over space. The area around a skilled archer became dangerous ground. Anything entering it could be killed without touching the person who released the string. There is something unsettling about how delicate the bow appears compared to what it can do. It is not a heavy stone axe. It is not a massive club. It is not a spear held in both hands. It is wood under tension, a cord and a narrow shaft, W shaft. Yet that fragile-looking system changed the future of human survival. It allowed small bodies to kill large ones. It allowed hidden people to defeat visible ones. It allowed humans to expand into environments where direct confrontation would have been too costly. The bow belongs on this list because it marks a turning point in the psychology of weapons. Killing no longer required the same level of physical contact. The attacker could remain distant, concealed, and almost untouched by the violence he created. Every later weapon that increased range followed the same logic. The crossbow, the firearm, the cannon, the missile. The bow was one of the first great steps in that direction. And in the end, the first bow and arrow did more than improve hunting. It changed what power felt like. A person could stand in silence, pull back a string, and decide the fate of something beyond arm's reach. The weapon made death travel faster than the body. And once humans learned to kill from hiding, the world became more dangerous in a way no animal had evolved to understand. Number 4. The Clovis point. Around 13,000 years ago, across what is now North America, a new kind of stone weapon appeared in the hands of human hunters. It was elegant, deadly, and unmistakable. The Clovis point was usually shaped like a long leaf, carefully flaked on both sides, with a sharp tip and edges capable of cutting deep into flesh. But its most distinctive feature was the flute, a long channel removed from the base, allowing the point to be hafted tightly onto a spear or dart shaft. This was not a random sharp rock. It was engineered killing technology. The Clovis point appeared in a world full of giants. Mammoths, mastodons, giant ground sloths, ancient horses, camels, direwolves, short-faced bears, and saber-toothed cats moved across North America. These animals had survived ice ages, shifting climates, predators, and environmental pressure for thousands upon thousands of years. Then humans arrived with weapons small enough to hold in the hand, but precise enough to bring down creatures that weighed several tons. The continent had never seen anything like it. What makes the Clovis point terrifying is the combination of craftsmanship and timing. Making one required extraordinary skill, but the stone had to be selected carefully, shaped through controlled strikes, thinned without breaking, and fluted at the base in one of the most difficult operations in prehistoric stoneworking. A single mistake could snap the point after hours of labor. That means Clovis technology was not casual. It required training, practice, and the passing of knowledge between generations. Behind each point was not only a hunter, but a tradition. These points were found at several major kill sites, often associated with mammoth and other large animal remains. They were not ornaments or symbols alone. They were weapons used in real encounters with enormous prey. A Clovis hunting party could strike an animal with multiple points, weaken it, follow it, and finish it. The weapon did not make the hunt easy, but it made the impossible more possible. A human body could not overpower a mammoth. A group of humans with stone points, planning, and courage could. The darker question is what happened after Clovis technology spread. Around the same broad period, many of North America's largest animals disappeared. Scientists still debate the causes. Climate change at the end of the Ice Age placed enormous stress on ecosystems. Habitats shifted, temperatures changed, and food sources were disrupted. But human hunting almost certainly added another pressure, especially for animals that reproduced slowly. A mammoth could not replace losses quickly. A few successful hunts repeated across generations could become a force larger than any single campsite could see. That is the unsettling part. Extinction does not always require hatred, waste, or intention. It can begin with survival. A group kills to eat, another group kills to feed children, another follows the same herds. The weapon works, the method spreads, the animals grow fewer, but each successful hunt still feels necessary in the moment. By the time the pattern becomes visible, the world has already changed. The Clovis point may not have acted alone, but it entered North America at exactly the moment when giant animals were most vulnerable. The weapon also changed the identity of humans in the New World. These were not passive wanderers entering an untouched continent. They were skilled hunters, carrying a technology capable of reshaping ecosystems. The fluted point gave them reach, penetration, and reliability. It allowed them to face animals that should have been beyond human strength. In that sense, the Clovis point was more than a tool. It was a declaration that intelligence had become a predator. There is something haunting about its beauty. That many Clovis points are so finely made that they look almost ceremonial, even when they were built for killing. Their symmetry shows patience, their edges show precision, their flutes show risk and mastery. The same object can appear graceful in a museum case and brutal when imagined inside the ribs of a dying mammoth. That contradiction is part of the human story. Our deadliest tools are often also among our most carefully made. The Clovis point belongs on this list because it represents a moment when human technology met a continent of animals that did not yet understand the danger. It did not roar, chase, or claw. It waited in a shaft of wood, shaped by hands and carried by strategy. When thrown or thrust, it turned stone into a force capable of altering the future of North America. The giants vanished for many reasons, but the Clovis point remains one of the sharpest symbols of the moment humans became impossible to ignore. Number 3. The stone mace and war club. Not every prehistoric weapon was made to hunt animals. Some were made for something darker. A sharpened spear can bring down prey, a bow can strike from distance, a chopper can cut meat from bone. But a mace or war club has a simpler and more disturbing purpose: to crush. It does not need a fine edge. It does not need deep penetration. It works by weight, speed, and impact. When a stone head or heavy wooden club meets bone, the body breaks. The club may be one of the oldest weapon ideas in human experience. A branch, a rock, or a heavy bone can become deadly in a hand. But over time, prehistoric people refined the idea, and they shaped stones into mace heads, attached them to wooden handles, and created weapons designed specifically to multiply the force of a swing. This was no longer a tool that happened to be dangerous. It was violence given form. A stone mace did not skin animals or carve wood well. Its purpose was to smash through resistance. What makes this weapon terrifying is how close it forces the attacker to stand. A sling stone flies from distance, an arrow crosses open air, a spear can extend reach. But a club demands proximity. To kill with it, a person must step near enough to see the victim's face, raise the weapon, and bring it down with full force. For the path to violence is physical, direct, and personal. There is no illusion of distance. The attacker feels the impact through the handle. Archaeological evidence from early violent sites shows how brutal this kind of weapon could be. Skulls with depressed fractures, shattered facial bones, broken arms raised in defense, and bodies showing repeated blows all point to close-range attacks. These injuries are not the clean punctures of a spear or the narrow entry marks of an arrow. They are crushing wounds, the marks of a weapon built to break the human frame. In some cases, the victims were not only defeated, they were finished. That is why the stone mace and war club mark an important shift in the story of weapons. Many earlier tools could serve both survival and violence. A hand axe could butcher animals or harm a rival. A spear could hunt prey or defend a group. But the mace moves more clearly toward interpersonal killing. Its design fits the human body too well. The skull is vulnerable to impact. The arms break when raised against a blow. The ribs collapse under heavy force. A mace does not need to be complicated because the target is already fragile. The rise of such weapons suggests that prehistoric conflict was not rare or accidental. And as groups grew, moved, and competed for water, hunting grounds, territory, mates, or stored food, violence could become organized. A war club is not only an object, it is a sign of expectation. It means someone thought close combat was likely enough to prepare for it. It means the danger was not only from animals in the dark, but from other humans beyond the next ridge, river, or campfire. There is a deep discomfort in that idea. Prehistoric people are often imagined either as peaceful children of nature or as constant savages. The truth was almost certainly more complex. They cared for family, made art, buried the dead, taught children, and knew the land with intimacy, but they also carried weapons that could crush another person's skull. Compassion and violence were not separate chapters of human history. They grew together in the same species, in the same hands. The mace also changed power within human groups. Strength mattered, but so did possession of the weapon, surprise, and coordination. A group armed with clubs could attack quickly at close range. They could overwhelm isolated individuals, raid camps, or execute captured enemies. The weapon required no rare material and no advanced machinery. Wood and stone were enough. That simplicity made it widespread, durable, and difficult to remove from human conflict. And what makes the war club so haunting is its continuity. Later civilizations replaced stone with bronze, then iron, then steel. They decorated maces with royal symbols and carried them as signs of authority. But the basic idea did not change. A weighted object at the end of a handle remained one of the most direct expressions of violence ever invented. The same motion that killed in prehistory continued into ancient battlefields, medieval wars, and modern streets. The stone, mace, and war club belong on this list because they reveal the moment weapons were no longer only about surviving nature. They were about dominating other humans. And they show that organized violence did not begin with empires, walls, or written laws. It began earlier, with a hand gripping a heavy object and deciding that another human body could be broken. In the long history of weapons, few inventions are as simple or as honest about what they are for. Number 2. The sling. Of all prehistoric weapons, the sling may be the easiest to underestimate. It is not shaped like a sword, not heavy like a mace, not dramatic like a spear. It can look like almost nothing. 2 cords and a small pouch made from leather, fiber, or woven plant material. But in the hands of a trained user, that simple object could turn an ordinary stone into a projectile fast enough to break bone, crush a skull, or kill from a distance the victim could barely understand. The sling works through rotation. A stone or clay bullet is placed in the pouch, the cords are swung to build speed, and one cord is released at exactly the right moment. That release sends the projectile forward with terrifying force. The weapon looks primitive until the stone strikes. Then its true nature becomes clear. A sling does not cut like a blade or pierce like an arrow. It delivers concentrated impact. A small stone moving at high speed can shatter teeth, fracture arms, cave in a skull, or knock a warrior to the ground before he knows where the attack came from. What makes the sling especially disturbing is the gap between its appearance and its power. A spear announces itself. A bow has shape and tension. A mace looks dangerous even before it is raised. But a sling can be rolled up, hidden in clothing, carried by a shepherd, a hunter, or a child, and mistaken for a harmless strip of cord. Its ammunition is everywhere. River stones, clay pellets, shaped bullets, anything small and dense enough can become lethal. A slinger does not need a forge, a workshop, or a rare material. The landscape itself provides the weapon's teeth. The sling is also ancient because it fits the needs of a mobile world. It is light, cheap, and easy to carry across long distances. A hunter or herder could travel with it all day without burden. A group could gather ammunition in minutes. Unlike arrows, which require shafts, feathers, points, and careful repair, Sling stones can be replaced almost anywhere. That made the sling one of the most practical long-range weapons ever created. It turned distance into danger using almost no material at all. But the weapon was not easy to master. Its simplicity hides a brutal learning curve. To strike accurately, the user needed timing, rhythm, body control, and years of practice. The release point had to be precise. A fraction of a second too early or too late could send the stone far from the target. This meant that the best slingers were not casual users. They were trained from youth, their bodies shaped by repetition, their eyes trained to judge distance, motion, and arc. The sling rewarded discipline. In the right hands, it could outrange and outshock weapons that looked far more advanced. The sling changed conflict because it allowed violence to arrive from beyond easy reach. A group of slingers could stand apart from the main clash and rain stones into an enemy formation. Shields might stop some, but not all. Armor could reduce injury, but the impact still mattered. A sling stone striking a helmet could stun. A shot to the face could blind. A blow to the hand could remove a fighter from battle. But before metal armor became common, the sling must have been terrifying. Invisible danger from a distance, launched by people who could run, scatter, and return. There is also something psychologically frightening about being attacked by a sling. An arrow leaves a visible shaft. A spear shows its direction. But a sling stone may be too small and fast to follow. The victim hears a snap, a rush, or nothing at all, and then the body fails. Ancient armies later feared skilled slingers for exactly this reason. But the roots of that fear are prehistoric. The weapon made the air itself unsafe. The sling belongs on this list because it proves that a weapon does not need complexity to change history. It only needs to change the balance between risk and damage. With a sling, a weaker person could threaten a stronger one. A small group could harass a larger one. A hunter could strike birds, small animals, or enemies without closing the distance. Power no longer depended only on muscle or size. It depended on skill, timing, and the ability to make a common stone fly like a hidden hammer. The most haunting part is how long the sling endured. Later civilizations used it in war, siege, herding, hunting, and defense for thousands of years. Even after bows, metal weapons, and organized armies appeared, the sling remained dangerous because it was cheap, silent, portable, and devastating in trained hands. Its prehistoric origin never made it obsolete. It was too efficient to disappear. That is why the sling stands near the top of this list. It is a reminder that some of history's most frightening weapons do not begin as monuments of technology. They begin as simple ideas. A cord, a pouch, a stone, a moving arm, and then suddenly the distance between two living bodies becomes a killing space. Number 1. The composite bow. Somewhere on the open grasslands of ancient Eurasia, a craftsman solved a problem that had limited bows for thousands of years. A simple wooden bow could only store as much energy as the wood could bend without breaking. To make it stronger, it had to become longer, and a long bow was difficult to use from horseback or in tight movement. The solution was not to make one material work harder. It was to combine several materials into one weapon. Wood formed the core, horn added compression strength, sinew added tension. Glue bound them together. But the result was the composite bow, a weapon small enough to ride with, powerful enough to kill with, and sophisticated enough to reshape warfare. The composite bow was not simple technology. Every part required knowledge. Horn had to be prepared, shaped, and fitted. Sinew had to be stripped, dried, pounded, and layered. Wood had to be chosen carefully and cured. Glue had to be made from animal material and applied with skill. The finished bow needed time to settle before it could be trusted. This was not a weapon someone carved in an afternoon beside a fire. It was a product of specialists, patience, and a society capable of preserving craft knowledge across generations. And what made the composite bow terrifying was its power in a compact form. A short bow that could store enormous energy meant a rider could shoot from horseback without the weapon striking the horse or becoming useless in motion. That changed everything. A hunter or warrior no longer had to stand still to kill at distance. He could move, turn, retreat, circle, and fire. When the composite bow met the horse, the mounted archer was born, and with him came one of the most dangerous military systems in human history. A mounted archer could do what foot soldiers feared most. He could attack from beyond reach, withdraw before being caught, and return from another angle. And he could fire while moving, break formations, harass supply lines, exhaust slower armies, and refuse the kind of battle his enemies wanted. Against infantry armed with spears, axes, or short-range weapons, this was almost unfair. The battlefield expanded. Danger could arrive from the flank, from behind, from a retreat that was not really a retreat. The famous backward shot from horseback turned escape itself into an attack. The composite bow did not belong only to one people. Across the Eurasian steppe and beyond, versions of it became central to the power of nomadic and imperial armies. The Scythians, Huns, Turks, Mongols, and many others used the logic of mounted archery to challenge settled states that seemed stronger on paper. Cities had walls, empires had armies, but steppe warriors had speed, range, and a weapon that allowed them to decide when violence began and when it ended. The composite bow gave mobility a killing edge. What makes this weapon so important is that it sits at the border between prehistory and recorded history. Earlier weapons changed hunting, survival, and small-scale conflict. The composite bow helped change states, borders, empires, and entire continents. It was not just a tool for one hunter facing one animal. It was a system of power. But to produce it required animals, materials, craft, trade, and training. To use it well required years on horseback and years with the bow. A society that mastered both could project violence across distances that slower enemies struggled to answer. The psychological effect must have been devastating. An army could see mounted archers approaching, prepare for impact, and then never receive the close battle it expected. Instead, arrows came from distance. Horses turned away. More arrows came. The enemy chased and became exhausted. Formations loosened. Fear spread. The attack did not need one heroic charge. It could be repeated, patient, and controlled. The composite bow made warfare feel like being hunted by people who refused to stand still. There is a darker lesson in its construction. The bow was made from the bodies of animals, horn, sinew, hide glue. It was powered by human technique and carried by the horse. In a single weapon, the ancient world fused animal strength, human intelligence, and lethal distance. It was nature disassembled and rebuilt into controlled violence. That is what all weapons had been moving towards since the first stone chopper. Not just using the body, but improving it through the world outside it. The composite bow belongs at number 1 because it did more than make humans deadlier, but it helped carry prehistoric weapon logic into the age of empires. The sharpened stone made us competitors. The spear made us hunters. The sling and bow made distance dangerous, but the composite bow made speed, range, craft, and conquest into one system. Once it appeared, the strongest army was not always the one with the largest walls or heaviest soldiers. It was the one that could move faster, strike farther, and disappear before the enemy could.